My Golden Mother. In a small village in Nigeria, there was a woman named Amaka. She was a mother to 7 beautiful daughters. Their names were Ada, Ngozi, Ife, Neen, Chika, Obi, and Kioma. They all loved their mother very much, and she loved them more than anything in the world. Amaka lived with her husband, Dyke. Dyke was a strong man, but he was not happy. You see, Dyke wanted a son, a boy to carry his name and work on the farm with him. But every time Amaka had a baby, it was a girl. First, it was Ada, then Ngozi, then Ife, Neen, Chika, Obi, and finally Kioma. 7 daughters, but not one son. One night, Dyke came home very angry. "Why can't you give me a son, Amaka?" he shouted. Amaka was sad because she wanted Dyke to be happy, but she could not choose whether to have a boy or a girl. The next morning, when the sun was still hiding, Dyke left the house. He did not say goodbye, and he did not come back. Amaka and her daughters were alone. Amaka was worried. How would she take care of her daughters by herself? The village was not kind to women who did not have a husband. Some people whispered behind her back, saying she was unlucky. But Amaka did not listen. She knew she had to be strong for her daughters. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Amaka worked very hard. She worked in the fields, carried heavy baskets of food, and made clothes to sell in the market. But it was never enough. Sometimes, there was no food to eat, and the girls would go to bed hungry. The nights were long and full of scary noises. The wind would howl, and the trees would creak as if they were whispering secrets. But Amaka would gather her daughters close, hugging them tight. "Everything will be okay," she would say, even when her own stomach was empty and her heart was heavy with worry. The girls believed her because their mother was strong and brave. One night, when the moon was high and bright, something strange happened. Amaka woke up suddenly. She heard a soft voice calling her name. "Amaka! Amaka!" The voice was sweet like honey, but it made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She looked around the small, dark room, but she saw nothing. She thought it was just a dream, so she closed her eyes and tried to sleep. But the voice came again the next night, and the night after that. Each time, it was louder, closer. Amaka started to feel like someone was watching her, but when she looked, there was no one there. One evening, as the sun was setting and the shadows were growing long, Amaka told her daughters a story. It was a story about a golden mother who lived in a faraway land. This mother was very special because she had a heart made of pure gold. Her love was so strong that it could light up the darkest night. But the golden mother had a secret. She was hiding something very important, something that could change everything. "What was she hiding, Mama?" little Kioma asked, her big eyes wide with curiosity. Amaka smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "We will find out soon," she whispered, her voice trembling just a little. That night, the voice came again. "Amaka! Amaka! Come and find me." This time, Amaka knew she had to do something. She couldn't ignore it any longer. What was this voice? Where was it coming from? And what did it want? Amaka looked at her sleeping daughters, their faces peaceful and innocent. She knew she had to protect them, no matter what. Taking a deep breath, she quietly got up and stepped outside into the cool night air. The moon was full, casting a pale light over the village. "Who's there?" Amaka called out softly, her heart pounding in her chest. The wind blew gently, rustling the leaves. She heard the voice again, but this time it sounded like it was coming from the old forest at the edge of the village. "Amaka! Follow me." Amaka knew the forest was a dangerous place, especially at night. But something inside her, maybe it was the strength of the Golden Mother from her story, told her she had to go. She had to find out what was happening, for the sake of her daughters. With her heart beating like a drum, Amaka took a step toward the forest. The shadows seemed to move and dance as she walked, and the trees whispered secrets to each other. But she was determined. She would find out the truth, no matter how scary it was. As Amaka entered the dark forest, the voice grew louder, guiding her deeper and deeper into the woods. The trees closed in around her, their branches like long, twisted arms. The air was thick and it felt like the forest was alive, watching her every move. Amaka, come closer. What will Amaka find in the heart of the forest? Will she discover the secret of the Golden Mother, or will she face something even more mysterious? Amaka's heart was beating so fast. She was scared, but she kept walking deeper into the dark forest. The trees were big and tall, and their branches looked like arms reaching out to grab her. The ground under her feet was soft and made little sounds as she stepped. She wanted to turn back, to run home to her daughters, but the voice kept calling. Amaka, don't be afraid, come closer. Mother was very special because she had a heart made of pure gold. Her love was so strong that it could light up the darkest night. But the Golden Mother had a secret. She was hiding something very important, something that could change everything. What was she hiding, Mama? Little Kyoma asked, her big eyes wide with curiosity. Amaka smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. We will find out soon, she whispered, her voice trembling just a little. That night, the voice came again. Amaka. Amaka. Come and find me. This time, Amaka knew she had to do something. She couldn't ignore it any longer. What was this voice? Where was it coming from? And what did it want? Amaka looked at her sleeping daughters, their faces peaceful and innocent. She knew she had to protect them, no matter what. Taking a deep breath, she quietly got up and stepped outside into the cool night air. The moon was full, casting a pale light over the village. Who's there? Amaka called out softly, her heart pounding in her chest. The wind blew gently, rustling the leaves. She heard the voice again, but this time it sounded like it was coming from the old forest at the edge of the village. Amaka. Follow me. Amaka knew the forest was a dangerous place, especially at night. But something inside her, maybe it was the strength of the Golden Mother from her story, told her she had to go. She had to find out what was happening, for the sake of her daughters. With her heart beating like a drum, Amaka took a step toward the forest. The shadows seemed to move and dance as she walked, and the trees whispered secrets to each other. But she was determined. She would find out the truth, no matter how scary it was. As Amaka entered the dark forest, the voice grew louder, guiding her deeper and deeper into the woods. The trees closed in around her, their branches like long, twisted arms. The air was thick and it felt like the forest was alive, watching her every move. Amaka, come closer. What will Amaka find in the heart of the forest? Will she discover the secret of the Golden Mother, or will she face something even more mysterious? Amaka's heart was beating so fast. She was scared, but she kept walking deeper into the dark forest. The trees were big and tall, and their branches looked like arms reaching out to grab her. The ground under her feet was soft and made little sounds as she stepped. She wanted to turn back, to run home to her daughters, but the voice kept calling. Amaka, don't be afraid, come closer. Amaka looked around, but she couldn't see anyone. The moonlight was barely shining through the thick trees. Everything felt strange. It was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no frogs, just the wind whispering through the leaves. The voice was louder now, and it seemed to be coming from behind the biggest tree in the forest. Slowly, Amaka walked closer to the big tree. Her legs felt heavy like they didn't want to move, but she knew she had to go on. Her daughters were waiting at home, and she needed to find out who was calling her. When she reached the tree, she stopped. There was something strange there, a small, glowing light on the ground. It was tiny, like a star had fallen from the sky. Amaka bent down to look closer. Amaka, pick it up, the voice whispered softly, but now it felt like it was coming from inside her own head. Amaka hesitated. Should she touch it? What if it was dangerous? She thought about her daughters, Ada, Ngozi, Ife, Neen, Chika, Obi, and little Kyoma. She had to be strong for them. She reached out with her hand, her fingers shaking, and gently picked up the glowing light. As soon as she touched it, the light grew brighter. Amaka gasped and stepped back. The ground began to shake, just a little, and the air around her felt warm. The light was now so bright that it hurt her eyes, but she couldn't look away. The glow seemed to wrap around her like a blanket, and suddenly, she felt safe, like someone was protecting her. Then, out of the light, a figure appeared. It was a woman, tall and beautiful, with long golden hair that sparkled like the sun. She was wearing a long dress that flowed like water, and her eyes were kind, full of warmth. Amaka stared in shock. Who was this woman? Why was she here? The golden woman smiled at Amaka and spoke, her voice soft and gentle. Amaka, you are the golden mother. You have a heart full of love. You have suffered, but your love for your daughters shines brighter than any star. But now, you must know the secret. Amaka's eyes widened. What secret? She didn't understand. Come with me, Amaka, the woman said, a hand reaching out. I will show you. Amaka's heart was racing, but something told her she could trust this woman. Slowly, she took the woman's hand, and suddenly, the forest disappeared. Everything around them was glowing, bright and golden, like they were standing in a dream. Where are we? Amaka whispered, looking around. The golden woman smiled again. This is where the truth is hidden. The truth about you, your daughters, and what you must do. Amaka felt a shiver go down her spine. She wanted to scream, but she knew she couldn't wake her daughters. They would be too scared. So, she took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. Suddenly, the shadow stopped. It was right outside the door. Amaka held her breath, her hands shaking. The house was so quiet that she could hear the soft breathing of her daughters as they slept. Then, there was a knock at the door. Knock, knock, knock. Amaka jumped. Her heart was pounding so loudly in her ears that she almost couldn't hear anything else. She didn't know what to do. Should she open the door? What if it was something bad? What if it was the danger the golden woman had warned her about? But then she remembered the secret. The secret the golden woman had told her. Amaka knew that she had to be brave, no matter how scared she felt. She had to be strong for her daughters. Slowly, Amaka walked to the door. Her hands were shaking as she reached for the handle. She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. Then, with all the courage she could find, she opened the door just a tiny bit. But what she saw made her gasp. Standing in the doorway was a man. He was tall, with dark, sad eyes. His clothes were old and torn, and he looked like he had walked a long, long way. But there was something familiar about him. Amaka's heart stopped for a moment. She knew this man. It was Dyke, her husband, the father of her daughters. The man who had left them so many years ago. But why was he here now? Why had he come back? Dyke looked at Amaka with eyes full of sadness. Amaka, he said in a low, quiet voice. I've come back. I'm so sorry. Amaka didn't know what to say. She was surprised, scared, and confused all at the same time. Dyke had left them, and now he was back, standing right in front of her. But something didn't feel right. She remembered the warning, the danger. Was this really Dyke, or was it something else, something pretending to be him? Dyke took a step forward, but Amaka quickly stepped back, holding the door tightly. She wasn't sure if she should let him in. Amaka, please, Dyke said, his voice trembling. I need to tell you something. It's important. Please, let me in. Amaka looked into his eyes, trying to see if he was telling the truth. But the shadow behind him was moving, growing darker. And Amaka felt the fear creeping up inside her again. She had to decide. Would she trust Dyke and let him in? Or was there something else, something dangerous, hiding in the shadows? Before she could answer, there was another sound, a rustling noise coming from the forest behind Dyke. Amaka's eyes widened as she saw the trees start to shake, as if something big was moving through them, coming closer to the house. What was it? What was coming? And would Amaka be able to protect her daughters from it? The night grew colder, and the shadows deepened. Amaka knew that whatever was coming, it would arrive very soon. Amaka's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the trees behind Dyke move. The shadow seemed to grow taller, darker, and scarier. She didn't know what to do. Dyke was standing there, asking to come inside, but something didn't feel right. Was it really him? Or was it something pretending to be him? Amaka, please, Dyke whispered, his voice shaky. I need to talk to you. I need to explain. Amaka thought about her daughters sleeping inside. She couldn't let anything happen to them. She had to be careful. She looked at Dyke one more time, trying to see if he was really who he said he was. His eyes looked sad and his face looked tired, but there was something in the way he stood, something that made Amaka feel uneasy. Then, the rustling in the trees grew louder. Whatever was coming, it was getting closer. Amaka felt like the night was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Dyke, Amaka said, her voice shaking a little. What's in the forest? What is following you? Dyke's eyes widened in fear, and he glanced back at the trees. Amaka, there's no time. Let me in. Please? But Amaka hesitated. She couldn't move, couldn't decide. Something deep inside her was telling her to be careful, to wait. Just then, a cold wind blew through the trees, making the branches creak and sway. The shadows grew bigger, stretching out like long, dark fingers. Amaka felt a chill run down her spine. Amaka, please. Dyke begged, his voice sounding more desperate now. But as he stepped closer to the door, Amaka noticed something strange. His shadow wasn't moving like it should. It was darker, thicker, almost like it wasn't a shadow at all, but something alive. Amaka gasped and quickly pulled the door shut, locking it tight. Dyke banged on the door, but his voice didn't sound right anymore. It was deeper, colder, like the voice in the forest. Amaka, he shouted, but now it sounded like a growl. Let me in. Amaka backed away from the door, her heart racing. She knew now that this wasn't her husband. This was something else, something pretending to be him. The real Dyke would never scare her like this. Suddenly, the banging stopped. Everything went quiet. The shadows outside the window stopped moving, and the night became still. Amaka stood in the middle of the room, holding her breath, waiting. Then, she heard a soft knock on the door, different from before. It was gentle, almost like someone was asking politely to come in. Amaka froze, unsure of what to do. She listened carefully. Amaka, a voice whispered through the door. But this time, it wasn't Dyke's voice. It was soft and warm, like the Golden Woman's voice. Amaka, you did the right thing. But there's more you need to know. Open the door, but only if you believe. Amaka's hand shook as she reached for the door. Should she open it? Could she trust this new voice? The room was filled with silence, the only sound was her own breathing. She knew she had to make a choice. Taking a deep breath, Amaka slowly unlocked the door. Her hand hovered over the handle, and she whispered, I believe. She pulled the door open just a little, and what she saw made her gasp. There, standing in the doorway, was a figure bathed in golden light. It wasn't the woman from before, but a small, glowing figure. It looked like a child, with big, bright eyes and a soft smile. The figure floated just above the ground, its light shining gently in the dark night. Amaka, the figure said in a sweet, calming voice. You are safe now, but there's something you need to do. The real danger is still coming, and only you can stop it. Amaka's heart was still racing, but she felt a bit calmer now. The glowing figure didn't seem scary. It felt like it was there to help her. What do I need to do? Amaka asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The figure floated closer, its golden light warming the cold night air. You must find the hidden place, deep in the forest. There you will discover the truth about your daughters and what makes them special. But you must hurry, Amaka. Time is running out. Amaka's eyes widened. What hidden place? What truth? She had so many questions, but she knew there wasn't much time. She had to be brave and protect her daughters. I will go, Amaka said, her voice filled with determination. She looked back at her sleeping daughters, then turned to the glowing figure. But how will I find this place? The figure smiled, its light growing brighter. Follow the light in your heart, Amaka. It will guide you. With that, the figure began to fade, its light slowly dimming until it disappeared into the night. Amaka stood at the door, feeling the weight of what she had to do. The forest was dark and full of dangers, but she knew she had to go. She quietly gathered a small bag and placed it over her shoulder. She took one last look at her daughters, knowing she would return to them soon. Then, with a deep breath, she stepped out into the night, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The shadows in the forest were waiting, but Amaka was not afraid. She had a light in her heart, and she knew it would lead her to the truth. The hidden place was out there, and she was determined to find it. But as she walked deeper into the forest, the air grew colder, and the trees seemed to whisper secrets she couldn't understand. Amaka knew the real danger was still out there, somewhere in the darkness, waiting for her. And she had to find it before it found her. Amaka walked into the dark forest, her steps slow and careful. The trees were tall and thick, their branches like big, scary arms reaching out to her. But she kept going, holding on to the hope in her heart. She remembered what the glowing figure had said, follow the light in your heart. The night was very quiet. No birds were singing, and no animals were making any noise. It felt like the whole forest was holding its breath, watching her. But Amaka was not afraid. She thought about her daughters, Ada, Ngozi, Ife, Neen, Chika, Obi, and little Kyoma. She had to find the hidden place for them. She had to protect them. As she walked, something strange happened. A soft light began to glow in front of her, like a tiny star floating just above the ground. Amaka's eyes widened. This was the light in her heart. It was showing her the way. Amaka followed the glowing light as it led her deeper into the forest. The trees seemed to part for her, making a path. The light grew brighter with each step, and Amaka felt a warmth in her chest, like she was getting closer to something very important. After walking for what felt like a long time, Amaka reached a small clearing. In the middle of the clearing was a big, old tree. It was the biggest tree Amaka had ever seen, with roots that spread out in all directions. The glowing light floated above the tree, shining down on it like the sun. Amaka knew this was the hidden place. She walked up to the tree and placed her hand on its rough bark. The moment she touched it, she felt a strong pulse, like the tree was alive, like it had a heartbeat. The light around her grew brighter, and suddenly, she heard a voice, a soft, gentle voice that seemed to come from the tree itself. Amaka, the voice said, you have found the hidden place. Now you must listen carefully. Your daughters are special, more special than you know. They carry a great power within them, a power that can bring light to the darkest places. But this power is also very dangerous if it falls into the wrong hands. Amaka's eyes widened in surprise. Her daughters were special? They had a power? She didn't understand, but she knew she had to keep listening. The danger you felt, the voice continued, is a dark force that wants to take this power from your daughters. It will do anything to find them and use their power for evil. But you, Amaka, are the key to protecting them. You have the strength of a golden mother, and only you can keep them safe. Amaka's heart swelled with pride and worry at the same time. She would do anything to protect her daughters, but she didn't know how. What must I do? Amaka asked, her voice trembling. The tree's voice was calm and soothing. You must teach your daughters about the light inside them. They need to understand their power and how to use it for good. And you must prepare them for the battle ahead. The dark force will come, but with your love and guidance, they will be ready. Amaka nodded, even though she still felt a little scared. She knew she had to be brave, for her daughters and for the world. The tree's light began to fade, but before it disappeared completely, the voice spoke one last time. Remember, Amaka, the love in your heart is stronger than any darkness. Trust in that love, and you will never be alone. And with that, the clearing went quiet. The light was gone, and Amaka was left standing by the big, old tree, her hand still resting on its bark. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what she had learned. Her daughters were special, and they needed her now more than ever. She turned and began to walk back through the forest, the path now clear before her. The trees no longer felt scary, they felt like friends, guiding her home. As she walked, she thought about how she would tell her daughters everything. They would need to be strong and brave, just like her. But even as she hurried back to her little house, she couldn't shake the feeling that something dark was still out there, watching, waiting for the right moment. Amaka knew that the Real challenge was yet to come, and she needed to be ready for whatever would happen next. Amaka moved quickly through the forest, her heart beating fast. The trees were no longer scary, but she knew she had to hurry. Her daughters were at home, and she needed to tell them everything. They had a special power, and they had to learn how to use it. The dark force was coming, and Amaka needed to protect them. When she finally reached the edge of the forest, she could see her small house in the distance. The windows were dark, and everything was quiet. Amaka felt a little better seeing her home, but she knew the danger wasn't far away. As she got closer, she saw that the door was still closed, just as she had left it. She quietly unlocked it and stepped inside. Her daughters were still sleeping, their soft breaths filling the room. Amaka smiled, feeling the love she had for each of them. They were her whole world. But she couldn't let them sleep any longer. It was time to tell them the truth. Amaka gently shook Ada, her oldest daughter. "Ada, wake up," she whispered. Ada opened her eyes and looked at her mother. "Mama, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice sleepy. "Wake up your sisters, Ada. We need to talk," Amaka said softly. Ada nodded and carefully woke up her younger sisters one by one. Soon, all 7 daughters were sitting around Amaka, their eyes wide with curiosity and a little bit of fear. "Mama, what's happening?" Ngozi asked, rubbing her eyes. Amaka took a deep breath and looked at each of her daughters. "My sweet girls," she began, "there is something very important I need to tell you. You are all very special. Inside each of you is a power, a light that is strong and good. But there is a dark force out there, something bad, that wants to take this power from you." The girls looked at each other, confused and a little scared. "What do you mean, Mama?" Ive asked, her voice small. Amaka reached out and took Ive's hand, holding it tightly. "It means that you have something very special inside you, something that can help the world. But we have to be careful because the dark force will try to take it. We must stay strong and protect each other." Neen, the second youngest, looked up at her mother with big, worried eyes. "How do we protect our power, Mama?" Amaka smiled gently. "We protect it by staying together, by loving each other, and by learning how to use our power for good. I will teach you everything I know, and together, we will be safe." The girls nodded, but Amaka could see the fear in their eyes. She wished she could take away their worry, but she knew they needed to be ready. "Tonight, we will stay inside," Amaka said firmly. "We will not open the door for anyone, no matter what. We must be careful." Kyoma, the youngest, snuggled close to Amaka. "Mama, I'm scared," she whispered. Amaka wrapped her arms around Kyoma, holding her close. "I know, my dear," she said softly. "But I am here, and I will protect you. We will all protect each other." As the night grew darker, the girls huddled close to their mother. Amaka could feel the tension in the air, but she kept her voice calm and steady. She began to tell them stories, old stories about brave people who faced great challenges and won. She wanted to give them courage, to make them feel strong. But deep inside, Amaka knew that something was coming. She could feel it, like a cold wind blowing through her heart. The dark force was getting closer, and soon, they would have to face it. As the hours passed, the house remained quiet. The girls finally began to drift back to sleep, their fears easing a little with their mother's comforting words. But Amaka stayed awake, watching the door, listening to the night. She could feel the darkness pressing against the walls, waiting for the right moment. And she knew, when that moment came, she would have to be ready to protect her daughters with everything she had. The battle was coming, and there was no turning back. Amaka sat quietly in the dark room, her daughters sleeping around her. She didn't close her eyes, not even for a second. She kept listening to the sounds outside, but everything was still and quiet. The night felt very long, and she could feel the weight of it pressing down on her. Then, just as the sky began to turn a little grey with the coming morning, Amaka heard something. It was a soft sound, like a whisper, coming from outside the window. She froze, listening closely. The whisper was faint but growing louder, like someone was calling her name. Amaka. Amaka. Her heart started to beat faster. She didn't want to wake her daughters, but she knew she had to see what it was. Slowly, she stood up and moved to the window. She peered out through the small crack in the curtain. At first, she saw nothing, just the dark shapes of the trees and the faint light of dawn. But then she noticed something moving in the shadows. It was small and quick, darting between the trees. Amaka squinted, trying to see what it was. Suddenly, the whisper came again, louder this time. Amaka, come outside. Amaka felt a chill run down her spine. She knew she shouldn't go outside, not with the danger so close. But something about the whisper made her feel like she had to go, like there was something important waiting for her. She took a deep breath and quietly opened the door, just a little bit, enough to slip outside. The air was cold, and the morning light was just beginning to brighten the sky. She looked around but didn't see anyone. Amaka, the whisper came again, this time from the trees. She stepped closer to the edge of the forest, her feet moving slowly, carefully. Her heart was pounding in her chest. She knew she should go back inside to her daughters, but something was pulling her toward the trees. As she got closer, she saw a figure standing in the shadows. It was small, like a child, with glowing eyes that looked straight at her. Amaka's breath caught in her throat. The figure looked familiar, like someone she had seen before. "Who are you?" Amaka asked, her voice shaking a little. The figure stepped forward, and Amaka could see it more clearly now. It was the same glowing figure that had appeared before, the one who had told her about the hidden place. But this time, its light was dimmer, and it looked sad. "Amaka," the figure said softly, "there is something I need to show you. Come with me." Amaka hesitated. She knew she shouldn't leave her daughters alone, but the figure's voice was gentle, and it didn't feel like a trick. She nodded slowly and followed the figure into the trees. They walked for a little while, the forest growing darker and quieter around them. Amaka stayed close to the figure, its soft glow lighting the way. Finally, they stopped at a small, hidden clearing. In the middle of the clearing was a large stone, smooth and round, with strange symbols carved into it. "What is this?" Amaka asked, looking at the stone. "This is where the power of your daughters was born," the figure explained. "Long ago, this stone was touched by a great light, a light that gave your daughters their special power. But there is something you must know, something important." Amaka listened carefully, her eyes fixed on the stone. "The dark force that seeks your daughter's power knows about this place," the figure continued. "It will try to use this stone to take their power away. You must protect it, Amaka. If the dark force gets here, your daughters will be in great danger." Amaka felt a surge of fear and determination. She knew she had to keep this place safe, no matter what. "How do I protect it?" she asked. The figure's light flickered, and it looked at her with its glowing eyes. "You must seal this place with your love, Amaka. Your love for your daughters is stronger than any darkness. If you pour your heart into this stone, it will create a barrier that the dark force cannot break." Amaka nodded, understanding what she needed to do. She walked up to the stone and placed her hands on it. She closed her eyes and thought of her daughters, each one of them, their smiles, their laughter, and the love she felt for them. As she focused on her love, she felt a warmth spreading from her heart into her hands, then into the stone. The stone began to glow softly, just like the figure, and the symbols on it lit up with a golden light. Amaka felt the power of her love wrapping around the stone, creating a shield that would protect it. When she opened her eyes, the stone was shining brightly, and the figure was smiling at her. "You have done well, Amaka," the figure said. "Your love will keep this place safe. But remember, the dark force will not stop. It will keep searching for your daughters. You must stay strong and be ready for what comes next." Amaka nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. She knew the battle was far from over, but she also knew she was not alone. She had her daughters, and she had the love that would guide and protect them. The figure began to fade, its light growing dimmer. Go back to your daughters, Amaka, it said softly. They need you now. Amaka watched as the figure disappeared into the light of dawn. She turned and made her way back through the forest, feeling a sense of calm and purpose. She knew what she had to do, and she was ready to face whatever came next. As she reached her house, she could see the first rays of sunlight peeking over the horizon. The night had been long and filled with challenges, but Amaka was strong. She opened the door and stepped inside, where her daughters were still sleeping peacefully. Amaka smiled, knowing that she would do whatever it took to keep them safe. But she also knew that the real test was still to come, and she had to be ready for it. The dark force was still out there, waiting, and Amaka had to be stronger than ever before. Amaka walked quietly into the house, closing the door behind her. The sunlight was just beginning to fill the room, and her daughters were still asleep, their faces peaceful and calm. Amaka felt a deep love for them, stronger than anything else in the world. She sat down on the floor beside them, gently brushing Kyoma's hair away from her face. The youngest daughter stirred a little but didn't wake up. Amaka knew she had to be strong, stronger than she had ever been before. The stone in the forest was safe now, protected by her love, but Amaka couldn't relax. She knew the dark force would keep trying to find them. It wouldn't stop until it got what it wanted. Just then, Ada, the oldest, slowly opened her eyes. She looked up at her mother and smiled sleepily. "Mama, you okay?" she asked. Amaka smiled back and nodded. "Yes, Ada, I'm okay," she said softly. "But we need to talk. It's very important." Ada sat up, and soon the other girls began to wake up too. One by one, they all gathered around Amaka, their eyes filled with trust and love. Amaka felt her heart swell with pride. These were her daughters, and she would protect them with everything she had. "My dear girls," Amaka began, her voice gentle but serious, "I want you to know that we are safe, but we must be very careful. There is something bad out there that wants to take your special power away. But I have made a promise to keep you safe, and together, we will stay strong." The girls listened carefully, their faces serious. Even little Kyoma was quiet, her big eyes watching her mother closely. "What do we need to do, Mama?" Ngozi asked, her voice steady. Amaka looked at her brave daughters, feeling the strength inside them. "We need to stay close to each other, always. We must trust in our love and use it to keep the darkness away. I will teach you how to feel the light inside you, the power that comes from our love. That light will protect us." The girls nodded, understanding what their mother was saying. They might not know everything yet, but they trusted Amaka completely. Just then, a soft knock came at the door. Amaka's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected anyone, and the early morning was still too quiet. The girls looked at each other, their eyes wide with worry. "Stay here," Amaka whispered, standing up slowly. She walked over to the door, her hand hovering just above the handle. She took a deep breath, then opened it just a crack, peeking outside. Standing there was an old woman, her back bent with age, and her hair white as snow. She wore a long, simple dress and leaned on a wooden cane. Her eyes were kind but filled with a strange, deep wisdom. "Good morning, Amaka," the old woman said, her voice soft but strong. "May I come in?" Amaka hesitated, unsure of who this woman was, but something in the old woman's eyes made her feel like she could be trusted. She nodded slowly and opened the door wider, letting the old woman step inside. The girls stared at the old woman, curious and a little afraid. But the old woman smiled at them, and there was something warm and comforting in her smile. "My name is Neka," the old woman said. "I have come to help you, Amaka. I know about the dark force that seeks your daughters, and I have seen the light inside them. You are not alone in this fight." Amaka felt a wave of relief wash over her. Neka seemed to know everything without being told, and her presence made Amaka feel a little safer. "How do you know all this?" Amaka asked, her voice full of wonder. Neka smiled again, her eyes twinkling. "I have seen many things, my dear. The world is full of secrets, and I have spent my life learning them. I can teach you and your daughters how to use the power inside you to keep the darkness away. The girls looked at their mother, waiting to see what she would do. Amaka knew this might be the help they needed, the guidance they had been waiting for. Thank you, Neka, Amaka said, her voice filled with gratitude. We need all the help we can get. Neka nodded and walked further into the room. We will begin right away, she said. There is much to learn, and time is short. But with love and light, we will be ready for whatever comes. And so, under the watchful eye of the old woman, Amaka and her daughters began their lessons. They learned how to find the light inside them, how to make it grow stronger, and how to use it to protect each other. But even as they practiced, Amaka could feel the darkness still out there, waiting, watching, and growing stronger. She knew the real test was still ahead, and they had to be ready for it. The battle was not over, and Amaka knew that soon, the dark force would make its move. And when it did, she and her daughters would need every bit of strength they had to face it. The days passed, and Neka stayed with Amaka and her daughters, teaching them every day. She showed them how to find the light inside their hearts. It was a warm, glowing feeling, like love, and when they focused on it, they felt strong and safe. Neka taught them how to use this light to protect themselves and each other. She said that when they all held hands and thought about their love for one another, their light would become even stronger, like a big, bright shield that nothing bad could break through. The girls practiced every day. They would sit in a circle, holding hands, and close their eyes. They thought about all the happy times they had shared, like when they laughed together, played together, or hugged their mother. As they did, they felt the light inside them grow brighter and warmer. Amaka watched with pride as her daughters grew stronger. She knew that the dark force was still out there, but she also knew they were getting ready for it. Neka had brought hope into their lives, and for the first time in a long while, Amaka felt a little less afraid. One evening, after a long day of practicing, Neka gathered the girls and Amaka around the fire. The flames danced and crackled, casting warm light across their faces. Girls, Neka began, her voice soft but serious, you have learned a lot, and I am proud of you. But there is something you must know. The dark force will try to trick you. It might come in a way that doesn't seem scary at first. It might try to make you feel sad or angry. When that happens, you must remember the light inside you. Hold on to it and stay together. That is your greatest strength. The girls nodded, understanding the importance of Neka's words. They knew they had to be careful and stay close to one another. As the night grew darker, Amaka felt a strange chill in the air. It was different from the cool night breeze. It felt like a shadow creeping closer. She glanced at Neka, who was staring into the fire with a worried look in her eyes. Neka, what is it? Amaka asked quietly. Neka looked up at Amaka, her face serious. The dark force is near, she whispered. It is testing our strength, waiting for the right moment. We must be ready. Amaka's heart began to pound. She knew the time was coming, but she didn't feel afraid. She had her daughters, and they had each other. Together, they were strong. Later that night, as everyone was asleep, Amaka heard a sound outside. It was soft at first, like the wind rustling the leaves, but then it grew louder, like a low, distant hum. Amaka's eyes snapped open, and she sat up, listening carefully. The hum grew louder and louder until it sounded like a deep, rumbling growl. Amaka's heart raced. She knew the dark force was finally here. She jumped out of bed and rushed to wake Neka. Neka, it's here, she whispered urgently. Neka's eyes opened instantly, and she sat up, alert. Wake the girls, Amaka. We must prepare. Amaka quickly woke her daughters. They were sleepy and confused, but when they saw the worry in their mother's eyes, they knew something was wrong. Girls, remember what Neka taught you, Amaka said, trying to stay calm. We must hold hands and focus on our light. Stay close to each other. The girls nodded, their faces serious. They formed a circle and held hands tightly, closing their eyes and concentrating on the love they shared. As they did, the growling sound outside grew louder, and the air inside the house felt colder. Amaka could feel the darkness pressing against the walls, trying to get in. but she didn't let go of her daughter's hands. She kept thinking about their love, about how much they meant to her. Suddenly, there was a loud bang on the door. The girls jumped, but they didn't break the circle. They held on even tighter, their faces filled with determination. "Don't be afraid," Necker said, her voice calm and steady. "Remember your light. It is stronger than anything out there." The banging grew louder, and the whole house seemed to shake. But inside the circle, the girls felt a warmth spreading from their hearts, just like Necker had taught them. The light grew brighter and brighter, until it filled the room with a golden glow. The dark force outside roared, angry that it couldn't get in. It pushed harder against the walls, trying to break through the light. But the girls held on, their love for each other stronger than ever. Amaka looked at her daughters, and for the first time, she saw the glow of their light shining in their eyes. She knew they were ready. They had the strength to face anything, as long as they were together. The dark force outside howled in frustration, but it couldn't get past the light. It pushed and pushed, but the love inside the house was too strong. Finally, with one last roar, the dark force retreated, fading away into the night. The house grew quiet, and the air became warm again. The girls opened their eyes, and Amaka let out a sigh of relief. They had done it. They had faced the darkness and won. But Amaka knew this wasn't the end. The dark force would come back, and they would need to be ready. But for now, they had a moment of peace, a moment to rest and gather their strength. Amaka smiled at her daughters, her heart full of pride. "You were all so brave," she said softly. "We are safe because of you." Necker nodded, a proud smile on her face. "You are stronger than you know, my dear girls. Remember that, always." And so, as the night slowly turned into morning, Amaka and her daughters sat together, feeling the warmth of their love and the light they had created. They knew the dark force was still out there, waiting for another chance, but they also knew that as long as they had each other, they could face anything that came their way. The years passed, and the small house in the village where Amaka and her daughters once lived was just a memory. The 7 daughters grew up to become strong, successful women. They traveled the world, each finding their own path and achieving great things. Ada became a respected leader in her field, known for her wisdom and kindness. Ngozi used her talents to create beautiful art that inspired many. Ife, always the dreamer, became a successful writer, touching hearts with her stories. Neen, with her love for science, made incredible discoveries that changed lives. Kyoma became a famous musician, her songs bringing joy to people everywhere. Uche built a successful business empire, and Ijeoma used her skills to help others, creating charities that made a real difference. They lived in beautiful houses in many different countries, drove amazing cars, and enjoyed the wealth they had earned. They each had wonderful families of their own, with loving husbands and children who filled their lives with joy. But no matter where they went or what they achieved, they always remembered their mother, Amaka. They visited her often and made sure she had everything she needed. They honored her with great respect, knowing that none of their successes would have been possible without her love and strength. Amaka lived a life filled with happiness and contentment. She had everything she had ever dreamed of, her daughters thriving, and they loved her deeply. Her heart was full of gratitude for the life she had, for the strength she had found within herself, and for the incredible daughters she had raised. One day, a familiar face appeared at Amaka's door. It was Dyke, the husband who had once left her because she couldn't give him a male child. He looked older, his face lined with regret and sadness. He had heard of the success and happiness Amaka and her daughters had achieved and realized how wrong he had been. Dyke stood before Amaka, his voice trembling. "Amaka, I'm so sorry. I see now that I made the worst mistake of my life. I abandoned you and our daughters, and I regret it every day. You and your daughters are amazing. I can't believe how much you've achieved." Amaka looked at him with a calm, forgiving smile. "Dyke, the past is gone, and we have moved forward. My daughters and I have built a beautiful life. We are happy and successful because of the love we have for each other. I am grateful for the life we have." Dyke hung his head, feeling the weight of his actions. "I know I can't change the past, but I hope you can forgive me." Amaka nodded, her eyes kind. I forgive you, Dyke. But remember, my life has been full of blessings, not because of what you did or didn't do, but because of the love and strength we built together. With that, Dyke left, feeling a bit lighter but still burdened by the mistakes he had made. He knew he could never undo the past, but he hoped that maybe, one day, he would find peace with it. Amaka continued to live her life surrounded by love and joy. Her daughter's successes were a testament to her strength and endless love. They celebrated their achievements together and cherished every moment they had. Amaka was truly a golden mother, treasured and loved forever. Her life was a beautiful story of resilience, love, and the unbreakable bond of family. And as she looked at her daughters and their families, Amaka knew that the love she had given was the greatest gift of all. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to this channel for more interesting videos.